What's up, everybody? We are back. It's another week here at the factory tour. I've got Billy here again. I don't need to run through the whole introduction. You know who he is at this point. This is his third appearance. Apparently, he comes on every 7 episodes because this is episode 14. He did episode 7. He did the first one. I don't know. Maybe we'll make it a routine, but we're doing a special episode today because we're going to be answering your questions for the first time ever. I posted a tweet asking for some questions, wanted to do like a mailbag style. Really, I was just tired of coming up with the show topics myself. And I thought, why don't I just have the audience do the work for me? You guys, you came through and you got some great questions in here. So we're excited to answer them. But first, Billy, how are you feeling tonight?
I'm great, man. I'm great. Like I just told you, I made some notes, so I'm like super prepared for this episode. I feel like me and Chris are competing for most appearances on the factory tour for sure. So excited to come in after that episode. That was a great one you guys did. I was actually listening to it earlier today.
I appreciate that. We were really happy with how that one turned out. We were both just kind of, I don't know, working off of each other. And I think we really helped each other come up with some better takes, which is really what this is about. That's why I'm not just talking by myself into the camera, because the people I bring on usually have something interesting to say. I hope you brought your A game. But yeah, I mean,
I'll try.
Be a great show. Honestly, the questions are great. They are going to make for an interesting show. I've got them divided up into some different categories here so that we can just kind of keep things organized. We're going to do a little game theory and strategy off the top because that's my favorite. And we'll talk a little league management and setting, some personal like preferences and stuff. And then we've got some good old fashioned just trades and player takes that we can close things out with. But first, we're going to jump right in. Warm-up question is a little out of the ordinary, but this might have been my favorite question. There is a real question that comes after, but our friend Jack Lucene, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. He asks, would you rather fight one Myles Garrett-sized duck, but you're allowed a helmet as a weapon, or fight 100 duck-sized Myles Garretts with mini helmets? Billy, I'm going to let you take this one first. I mean, what are you thinking here?
Sure. The listeners really coming through with the hard hitters. Yeah, taking them on early. This one, I feel like Myles Garrett, anything size Myles Garrett is going to be much larger than me.
Right.
That just like goes without saying. But also, I feel like Myles Garrett-sized duck would be absolutely wild. So no, I think I'm going to take the 100. Even though they have helmets, I'm pretty sure I could stomp these guys out, kick them around. I just feel like I have a better fighting chance against the 100, even though it's a good amount. I know they could overwhelm me, but I feel like I stand a better chance.
I'm going to go the other way here because here's the thing, right? It is a giant duck, but it's still a duck. And I'm armed. I have a helmet. I can wear it. I can swing it around. On the other hand, like, yes, 100 duck-sized Myles Garretts are going to be small, but they're still like people, and he's still going to be like super jacked, right? Like if 100 ducks were coming after me, I feel like I would be very concerned. And if those ducks looked like, you know, the most muscular man you've ever seen, and they're wearing helmets and they're all coming at me, like, I think they would wear me down. And I have better options, I think, with the giant duck. Like, I could maybe confuse it. Like, I could escape it, but I don't know about the mini Myles Garrett. So I'm going to take the giant duck.
I guess you are wielding a helmet too, right? You have at least a weapon in your case.
Yeah. They don't have claws, you know, like he's going to he could like peck me. I mean, I guess he could swing his like wings around, but I don't know. I could handle the giant duck better.
I don't know what kind of ducks you got there in Philly, but these Florida ducks, bro, they're already pretty gnarly, man. They come after you if you get close to their little ducklings, bro. You better be careful out here. I'm telling you.
All right. Well, I don't think it's a good situation either way. But that's how I'd handle it. I'm hoping it's not something I have to deal with in real life. But we do have a follow-up question here, a real actual fantasy football question. So yeah, so this one, it's interesting. I've never really, I don't know, I guess I never thought about this before I heard the question, but the question is basically, how would you choose between two identically ranked players at the same position that you like equally? If you can't point to the stats, the team, or the quarterback, like basically we have two players that are as close as they can be. You like them roughly equally. They are similar ADPs, and they're on offenses of similar qualities. So this is a very, very tight. They said mainly wide receiver or running back. And my first thought was like, does this happen? Like, is this a situation that occurs with frequency?
Not typically for me. Like, I don't find myself in a lot of situations where I'm like, these two players are so close, like nothing, separates them at all.
Mhm.
I don't really find myself in that particular situation too often, especially when I'm like, if I'm eliminating quarterback, situation, age, like all the factors that kind of
Right.
would differentiate a player and matter for me. But I guess if it were to get to that point, I think part of it for me would be because I am like a film junkie. It might be how they play in terms of like on the field, are they low center of gravity type running back versus a guy who is a little more upright? Do I think he has, more sustainability in that, right? Health wise, whatever it is. So I think it's going to come down to like really, we're splitting hairs on things that might not matter as much. So it kind of comes down to preference, right? Kind of comes down to preference, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a good angle to take on it. I think for me, it's like I just have so many different ways of breaking the tie that it never gets to that point. It's like how in the NFL playoffs they have these contingencies for like if you get 8 ties down, it's like how many points did you score like on the road against these 3 opponents? And it's like we're never going to need this, right? But if we do, so it's like if we look at college profiles, we look at how players have produced in the past. For wide receivers, how do they earn targets? For running backs, it might be, do they play on third downs? Like there's so many ways to break ties that I feel like this doesn't come up much. And I did go to like startup ADP and I looked through to see if there are any situations like this. And there are definitely close, players that are really close where it's hard to choose. But there's rarely nothing between them. But I did come up with 2 things. Like if I was truly at a loss, there's nothing else I can point to. I have two things I would look at. Number one, which one of these players is more likely to gain trade value or hit some kind of like 99th percentile outcome? Like if I'm playing the hypothetical game, looking at maybe the other players on their team, what kind of contingent upside is there? How can they become a more valuable asset for me? And then the other one would just be because I play in a lot of leagues, do I already have a lot of one player and not as much of the other? Just kind of portfolio management. Like if I have Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews pretty closely ranked, and I have a lot more Kyle Pitts than Mark Andrews. So if you ask me right now, like, hey, you have to add one more of these guys, I'd probably just grab a Mark Andrews because I don't have as much.
Those are 2 really good points in terms of like breaking a tie without all the other stuff involved. Would you ever look, because we know that points per game is really indicative, of future success, future points per game, right? Like, would you ever look at that in terms of like 2 players, like being like, all right, like these are 2 players, they've both been in the league for 4 years, right? Like historically, like which one just scores more points? Like if we're coming down to it and these 2 are so similar and it's like same age and all that, I wonder if that might be a tiebreaker at times, like something that you can use. But again, like you said, these are all, would it ever get to that point? I don't know.
Yeah. I think points per game is definitely a good one. I mean, you have to apply context at all times, but if you're talking about a longer sample, 3-4 years and one player's just consistently been a higher scorer, unless there's some radical change to their situations, that's almost always going to be the guy that you want. So I definitely think, points can be that simple sometimes. You just look at the player that scores more points. It's usually the underlying metrics are going to support that as well. Cool. I think we handled that one, and we're going to jump into now the game theory and strategy portion of our mailbag. So we've got 3 great questions here. We're going to start with one question that we actually discussed on your last appearance here, which is, it comes in from John W. Marcheco. Sorry, I should have practiced the names beforehand. And he just asked, what is your favorite startup strategy? So we did a whole episode 7 was all about startup strategies and some players we're targeting and fading. I would recommend watching that episode if you have even more questions after, but we can touch on some of our, our go-to things. If you want to go first.
Yeah, definitely. I do. I also just really quick, I wanted to say about what we were just talking about in terms of points per game. I really loved what you and Chris were talking about in terms of the adjusted points per game. Because I just thought it's something that it's not like that. It's not necessarily super unique or anything, but it's something that you don't see used often enough, I think. And I'd like it to become more of a commonplace.
I wish that was listed somewhere more readily. Maybe it is on some site that I just haven't visited, but yeah, being able to just set like a threshold of snaps played to kind of eliminate those early exits because it's confusing. Like T. Higgins' stats last year are so bogus because he left 2 games like early in the first quarter, and you can't trust any of the numbers. It's confusing.
Absolutely. And hopefully maybe we can, I know we're working on getting some data pages up on Dynasty Football Factory. I think, Chris, both of the Chris's that we have are kind of in on that too. So maybe we can get that up there eventually on our site, and we can be the leaders in adjusted points per game.
That would be awesome. Let's do that. And now give me a startup strategy that you like.
Sorry. Whenever I come on here, man, I take the show off the rails. Okay. So my favorite startup strategy, and we did talk about this a lot the last time I was on, but hero running back for me, if like I was able to, just pick my strategy every single time that I could roll with, without the league messing it up for whatever reason and kind of screwing up my strategy, I would go hero running back, grab one of the top 5 in Dynasty, one of the top 5 Dynasty running backs if I could, and then just kind of fade it on from there. Prioritize at least 1 elite QB, maybe 2, but I think going hero running back kind of allows you to be flexible in that way, and you can kind of go after, some more elite players at other positions, especially quarterbacks. So do that. I like to, prioritize an elite tight end if I can, but mainly hero running back giving me that flexibility to kind of do whatever I want there. And I don't mind prioritizing wide receivers all the way until basically the, late, probably 7, 8, but definitely I can get to the double-digit rounds in the right draft.
I definitely like going heavy at wide receiver. But for me, like my number 1 goal is to get to elite quarterbacks if I can manage that. I am willing to overpay a little bit to do that, like to trade up. So if I have, a back end pick and I'm picking at 110, 202, like that's easy. I can grab, Lawrence Fields or something on the way up, and then grab like a Kyler or Watson on the way back. That usually works out. If I have an early pick, then I might have to try to swing a trade. And I'm comfortable doing that because the quarterback is just so difficult to replace, especially those top tier guys. I'd love to just lock them in. They're such stable assets year to year. They score the most points, and I can kind of figure out the rest later. I've only been able to pull it off in 1 or 2 startups, but getting the 2 elite quarterbacks and then adding an Andrews or Pitts on top is like, that's like my number 1 favorite way to do a startup. I think Malcolm actually said something similar in his strategy guide for the Dynasty Football Factory guide, is just, that's his go-to, because you just lock up those positions of scarcity. And then you have so much flexibility the rest of your draft to just load up on wide receivers and running backs. So I like to do that when I can, but it can be difficult. You usually have to pull a trade one way or the other. It just doesn't line up by ADP.
Yeah, getting those 2 elite quarterbacks, you almost always have to trade up, even if it's just a little bit, somewhere from like the 4th round and earlier. You're going to have to trade up in there and get somebody in. I mean, what is like elite QB? Like, where does that end for you? Is that QB 1 through 5, 1 through 12? Like, what do you consider?
So there are tiers within it, but there is a cutoff where, so I don't have the number off the top of my head, but you got, your usual suspects, and then you got like Kyler, Watson, Dak. And that's kind of where it ends for me. I'm willing to throw a dart at like an Anthony Richardson, but he's somebody I'm more comfortable taking in rookie drafts as opposed to startup drafts, just because I think he kind of locks you into he kind of locks you into a productive struggle. And I guess Kyler does too, because he's not really going to contribute for you this year, but at least you kind of know what you're getting when he comes back. With Anthony Richardson, if I'm drafting him at the 102 in a rookie draft, it's like either my team was really bad and that's why I have the pick, so it's okay if I'm, struggling this year, or I've traded for the pick, in which case I probably have some excess value anyway, and I can just stash him until, I can use him or while he accrues value. So I don't love his ADP. He also goes like super high. He goes like right next to Deshaun Watson and ahead of Kyler and ahead of Dak. So it's really those guys kind of ending with Dak Prescott. And then you get into the next kind of mini tier for me, which is like Tua, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, who I see all 3 guys as pretty similar. But I wouldn't include them in that elite quarterback tier. They're kind of like their own little group before there's a big drop off.
Tua is right on that, teetering right on the edge, man. I think he's got it in him, but I can see why you leave him out for sure.
Yeah, I think he's got it. It's just number 1, like he doesn't rush at all. Obviously, we know that, and then 2, I don't know what to do about the concussion stuff. Like, I don't know if it matters or not. It probably doesn't, but I also think there's enough managers in every league that think it matters, that it like artificially suppresses his trade value, because there's literally like 3 or 4 managers in every league that are just like, well, I don't want him on my team. And so he gives you a little bit less flexibility. I think if he plays this year and he's healthy, people will just forget about it and not care anymore. But right now it does make people nervous, which then makes me a little bit nervous about my ability to like pivot off of him if I need to.
That's fair. From a production standpoint, I definitely think he can be elite.
Yeah, I mean, he could definitely match somebody like Dak in terms of his production,
Right.
just because of the weapons and the efficiency of that offense. So he's right. Like, he's definitely the next. Dak is definitely my last guy in that group, and we'll talk about him a lot more later because there's actually a question about him. And then Tua is my next guy after him. So they're the 2 closest for me. And Dak doesn't run quite as much anymore after his ankle injury, it seems. So there's not a huge gap there, but it is a teardrop for me.
So the reason I was kind of taking us down this path is because I think that like a really, really optimal start would be if you consider, the Dak Tua area. I think you can kind of complete if you can get, an elite quarterback in the first round, you can get your tight end right there in the second round. You can maybe get another quarterback in the third. You can maybe push it to the fourth if you think Tua and Dak are elite, but probably got to go in the third. And then maybe you get your running back. And personally, that would be like my favorite hero running back start. Right? Get 2 really top end quarterbacks, a top tight end, start with a running back there, and then boom, just be able to hit wide receiver all the way through and not even worry about running back till towards the end, at least in this current dynasty landscape. That's how I like to approach it.
Now, who would some of those running backs be? Because I'm thinking just off, like, if I pull up ADP here, right, we've got our top 5. So Jahmyr Gibbs has actually maneuvered his way into that 5 spot, and he's going off the board at the 302 currently. So, where in there, who are some of the names that you're looking at? I mean, I know you like Gibbs. Is there anybody after him that you're comfortable with this hero RB setup?
Yeah, it gets really, really suspect for me after that. But I do think I'm looking at ADP right now, Bulletproof.
Yeah.
I think I'm good with Bijan, JT, Breece Hall, CMC, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. I think that's 6 right there.
Yeah.
If I may be okay stretching it to Eckler or Eckler and Chubb, maybe the 2 I'd stretch it to, but you're losing all sorts of value after this year, which I hate doing. So I don't like stretching it there personally. Sorry.
That's the thing for me. No, yeah, for sure. I like the top 5. I don't really draft McCaffrey in startups, and it's kind of the opposite of the reason I don't draft Richardson. It's the same. It locks me into a structure. Like, if I draft McCaffrey in the second round, I have to go so competitive to justify that. Like, I have to give myself the best odds that I can to win in this season, because he is going to lose value. I'm out on Saquon, to be honest with you, at least at his price. I think he's way too similar in terms of his projection for this season to like Ramondre Stevenson, Tony Pollard, Josh Jacobs, who are all going over a round later. And he's a year older than those guys. So I can't get on board with Barkley at his price. So for me, it's like top 5 or I'm out. I really liked earlier this offseason when Gibbs was going like late 3rd, early 4th round. That was a sweet spot for sure. Now I think he's at a great price now, but it's like, I don't want to draft him at the right price. I wanted to draft him at a discount. So
yeah, totally. I mean, I think Ramondre could be a cheap option for this kind of build, for the hero running back kind of build. Now, he doesn't give you the same longevity as the top 5 currently do, but he definitely gives you the workhorse back role and some youth, definitely some youth. And I think that he kind of fits that role, and you could definitely stretch it to one, but it's harder to guarantee that you're going to get him in those middle rounds. I've seen people reach on him a ton. So
I do like where he's sitting in ADP. I can't believe he's going after Najee Harris, but it is what it is. I'll take it. We have gotten a little off the trail of strategy here. Of course, strategy involves players, and that was all good stuff. But let me just throw out another little piece of strategy, something that I try to do, which is trying to maneuver the draft board to understand where the value pockets are. So for me, after the like very early 5th round, there's a big drop off for me in terms of the value of the players. There's a lot of these like mid-tier wide receivers that I have no interest in, like DJ Moore, Michael Pittman. There's some pretty sketchy running backs going in that zone that are not guys I'm targeting. Like, I want the elite guys, or I want to wait, like you said. There's also these tight ends that kind of get pushed up because they're consistent but not really high scoring. So there's just like a lot of players that I don't want here. There's also like Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, these very like middling quarterbacks that aren't going to be difference makers. So I'm just getting out of the 5th, 6th round. What I'm trying to do is use those picks to move me up, get an extra 2nd or 3rd round pick. And then I don't care if I don't pick again from round 4 or 5 to round 7 or 8. I'm fine with that because I think the players that are going there are very similar in terms of their value. Like, I don't think there's a big drop off. I'm comfortable grabbing all the wide receivers in that range. You know, the Marquise Browns, Amari Cooper, Deontay Johnson. There's even, you know, if you want to grab running backs that are just volume projections, I mean, Rashad White, Cam Akers are going there. There's still quarterbacks like you can get Russell Wilson super late. Geno Smith is rising, but still in that 7th round. So I think that's a hot spot for value. And I'd love to just have 2 or 3 extra picks in that range, skip the 5th and 6th round altogether to get myself an extra stud at the top.
Yeah. I mean, looking at it, it makes sense. There's a ton of landmines in that range. You can just see, I mean, honestly, a lot of those dead zone running backs are in there that I typically want to avoid. So yeah, I can definitely see why you want to do that. And that's a good strategy. I mean, that's honestly, those picks can help you get up to that elite quarterback that you want. You can use those 5th, you can add a 5th, 6th round pick to, a 3rd or something like that or whatever. And you can get like a really, really high end player, especially at the quarterback position if you want. And that can set you up big time.
Yeah, I've found those trades to really be doable. People are willing to make those types of deals. There are people that definitely see value in those 5th, 6th rounds, and there is value there. It's just there are a lot of landmines, like you said, and they're all players that I'm comfortable missing on if it means I secure an extra, high end talent, or I can trade down and try to pick up like a future first or something. But yeah, basically just there's an art because in a startup draft, like you have to draft the players in sequence. It doesn't always work out right that like each sequential pick is, X amount of value less than the previous pick. Like the trade market is much more fluid. Whereas in a startup draft, you basically have like 36 players here going in this 3-round span where I wouldn't really add a second to get any of them versus the other, but they have to go in some order. So it's like you just are forced to reach on guys basically, or if you think of it the other way, you're forced to get these other guys at value relative to the 6th round picks. So that's just where I found the value falling. It changes every year, but right now that's really how it looks for me.
I love that. Love pointing that out. That's a huge one for people.
Okay. Before we move on, I just wanted to throw out there that we do have the DFF startup draft guide just came out for the members. And Malcolm, who we'll be having on the show next week, actually, he's been in Austria having some internet problems, so we haven't been able to get him on the show. But he'll be on next week. We are actually going to go in depth on his strategy guide that he wrote for the draft guide, but I definitely would recommend checking that out if you have a membership, or if you don't have a membership, get one, because he wrote like 10 pages of just brilliant startup strategy. So if you're about to do a startup, like I would definitely check that out. I think he really nailed that one. All right. Next strategy question. When is the right time to trade away an elite quarterback in Superflex? And if you are trading them, what would be your asking price? This comes from Zach Bredman. So, Billy, is there a right time to trade an elite quarterback in Superflex?
Yeah, let me check my notes. Never is when you should trade an elite quarterback. I mean, I guess if there were ever a time to do it, maybe it's you have a thin roster and you went on just a crazy title run, and it's like you just had a great year, one that you didn't expect to have. And you just have no way, you don't see any way this roster can keep this up. And that's like your only real, trade chip. Maybe that's when you got to move on and try to acquire, 3 first-round picks or maybe even plus, depending on the quarterback you have in terms of value. You're not probably going to find somebody with 3 first-round picks, but sometimes you do. But that kind of value. So there's just really not too many times I find myself in that situation where I'm like, I got to get rid of this elite quarterback. What am I going to do with him on my roster?
Yeah.
I would need so much. Like, I don't know. Like, you made a trade in Console Wars in a league we're in together recently. I think you acquired Josh Allen, and I thought this was a great way to acquire an elite QB. I think I would need more. And I think the trade was, you traded Brock Purdy, Bryce Young, a 24 first, and what was the last piece?
I think it was Jahan Dotson.
Jahan Dotson. That is what it was. A 24 first and Jahan Dotson. So just say the 24 first is mid. Just say that.
Right.
Your roster might be very competitive now. Who knows? But say it's mid. I mean, to me, you gave up maybe 3 firsts there in total value. Like I was trying to split this up. We were talking about it on Dynasty Underdog, and I was like, that's great. Like that's really, really good value for Josh Allen. Like as soon as I saw it come across my email, I was like, great trade. Great trade, Paul.
Thank you.
But that to me was a good template in terms of this question of like how to trade for one. But to if I was trading one away, I think I would need easily, switch Brock Purdy out for like a real quarterback, or switch Brock Purdy out for like another first maybe, and maybe we're getting close. But I don't love Jahan Dotson, so I'd still probably need more or a different player,
Yeah, I my first thought was like, I'd rather trade for the elite quarterback than trade them away. And then my second thought was, like you said, if you have a really low value roster. So I've taken over a couple of like orphan teams that were just absolutely abused, like horrible condition. I actually have one right now where I don't even know what I want to do with it, because I have Hurts and Lamar and like absolutely nothing else. And I'm just, there's another team trying to tank with me this year. And like, if I keep Hurts and Lamar, I might not get the 101. So I'm like really confused about what to do, because I don't know how I'm going to feel to starting lineup, but I also don't want to trade either of those quarterbacks away. So I've been pondering it. I don't have an answer yet, but if you do have a really low value team where you have an elite quarterback and you don't really have a path to accruing a lot of value, you might have to break that asset down into a lot of smaller bets to accrue enough value to get back into contention. Like at a certain point, there's just, you'd have to wait till, the 2028 rookie draft is over to have enough players on your team if you don't trade anything. Or you'd have to get crazy lucky with like waiver wire pickups or whatever. And so you just might be better off making that trade, but you have to be picky about what you're getting back in that situation. You can't just trade for like a hodgepodge of pieces, like lower tier assets. So you need to be getting a collection of blue chip assets, whether those are like young ascending players, specifically draft picks. Draft picks are the number one thing to get because they always gain value. They can't get hurt. It's like a absolute fail safe. It's like you have like a Roth IRA or like a, whatever, your 401k. It's just like gaining interest over time, and you don't need to score points. So you get to just benefit from that pick accruing value without losing anything. So getting multiple firsts out into the future, especially on a team where, maybe things don't go super well for that team, and presumably a mid first becomes an early first, right? So you just want to put yourself in position to benefit from things that can go in your favor. Whereas with like a Josh Allen, as great as it is to have him, he can't get more valuable. So no matter what you do with Josh Allen on your team, he can't make your roster better.
Yep. I agree with all that.
The only other situation I can think of is if you have 3 of them. So if you find yourself with 3 elite quarterbacks, if your team's like crazy stacked and you're like top to bottom, you're already a favorite in your league, hold on to them. That's fine. But most people aren't in that situation. It's very hard to do that. If you have 3 top quarterbacks, you might want to try and get a haul for one of them so that you can improve the rest of your starting lineup. And I just did this actually because I had a league with Kyler, Dak, and Trevor Lawrence. I had drafted, I don't actually remember how I got all these guys, but they were all on my team, and I won the championship last year, but I have made some trades and some players got older, and I just wanted to strengthen my roster. It's only a start 9 league, so I really need studs, right? Like you need great players in every spot pretty much. And, running back and wide receiver were fine, but I really didn't need that third quarterback just burning a hole in my bench. So I did end up trading Kyler Murray, and it was a big trade. I'm not going to get all the pieces in it, but it was basically like turn Kyler Murray into Tyreek Hill plus. And I was able to like upgrade my tight end from Greg Dulcich to Dallas Goedert, and I was able to add Tyreek Hill into the mix. And so I still have Dak and Lawrence. I got Russell Wilson back in the deal, so I still have my like legit, quarterback 3 option. But now that roster value has been turned into pieces that I can actually start on a weekly basis.
I remember seeing that trade. You absolutely smashed that one too. That was a crazy, ridiculous trade. But what you were just talking about with the QB3 and having an extra elite one, this just reminded me of another kind of strategy that is worth bringing up for a second at least. But I don't know if you listen to John Hogue a lot in the Superflex Super Show, but I do. And I was on there recently, and he's a great guy, great show, like highly recommend it. But he came up with the strategy of QB Extreme, which is essentially just hoarding all the QBs in a draft. Right. And so that allows you, like, no matter what they are, like, doesn't even matter if you already have 2 elite, he's going to go and take Kirk Cousins. He's going to go ahead and take Russell Wilson. He's going to go and he's going to have them all, and he's going to trade for the other pieces. Right. And so that is another way you can do it. You can get yourself in some trouble if you pick the wrong quarterback. So
right.
for me, if you're going to do that, you may as well just like sell everything and go get they better all be elite quarterbacks, because then you can actually do something with it. And I think when I was on the show with him, that's what I said to him. He asked me kind of like, what about the QBX? What would you do differently? And I think that's an interesting strategy with the right board, with the right league. If things fall right and you can make a trade or two and you can get 4 elite QBs, like, you're going to break the league. You're going to make a couple teams 1 QB teams in a super flex league. You're going to, have value that you can really trade and kind of almost make it into whatever you want and probably get plus on top of it. So that's an interesting strategy as well, just while we're talking about strategy.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely risky because you need an active league, and you definitely are, like, you have leverage, but you're also kind of like at the whims of the other managers. Like, what if all the teams that miss out on quarterbacks just decide to tank? And then there's, a couple teams that have really good, situations, and then they just kind of let it ride, and then, you're stuck. But there's all these different strategies work in different leagues. I could definitely see it panning out because these quarterbacks do go for a lot sometimes. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much covers it. Like, most of the time, just hold on to that quarterback. You're not going to want to trade them. There's just some small, situations come up once in a while where you might need to, and that's kind of how you can think about it. The last strategy question, this was a thinker for me, comes from Nathan GN from JWB, who asks, how much should we be anticipating the buyer versus seller dynamic of each league each season, and how do we stay ahead of it? I'm gonna let you go first here, because honestly, I just want to hear what you say so I can piggyback off of
it. Sure. It's an interesting question. Like, you could take it a lot of different directions. I think that it's something you should be thinking about all the time, to be honest. But I think a good way to kind of view it is the life cycle of dynasty picks, values, players, right? Because there is a cycle that you can follow, a yearly cycle that you can follow, and kind of see the peaks and valleys in values for the different kind of assets on your dynasty roster. So I think having a good feel for that life cycle is super important, right? So, like, understanding that future picks are going to lose a lot of value as we head into the season, right? In terms of trade value. So you can kind of, it's not a time you want to like necessarily be getting rid of them, right? Because when you go into the draft next year, they're going to have accrued a ton of value, right? So knowing that gives you a lot of advantage, and especially over some league mates who may not be thinking about this. When you're trading for their picks in the lull, and then you're selling them back in the peak, that's a huge advantage to you. So that's kind of, when I saw this question, that's how I viewed it, is kind of knowing, over the next few months, players are going to have more value, points are going to have more value, So just knowing those cycles and when those are going to happen throughout the year, paying attention to those. I just don't think everybody does it, so it gives you a clear advantage.
Yeah, that's all great stuff to start us out, especially with the life cycle of Dynasty. There's a great graphic that floats around Twitter every once in a while that has like this kind of circular view of like when picks and veterans accrue value and lose value. And if I could put it on the screen, I would, but I don't know where it is, but it's out there. But the way you put it is correct.
At FF Bowler EK on Twitter, if you want to find it.
He's the one who made it. Yep. It's a great chart to help you kind of conceptualize, when assets are more or less valuable. I should have taken more notes on this question because I have a bunch of things bouncing around my head and I need to say them all before I forget them. But the first one is the best way to stay ahead of any kind of buyer and seller dynamic is to keep your assets as liquid as possible. So what I mean by that is holding on to assets that are easier to trade. And not getting too caught up on what your roster looks like. So the league I just talked about, where I said I traded Kyler because I had 3 quarterbacks, part of the reason that I wanted to grab Tyreek Hill is because I did have a bit of a weakness at wide receiver. So I just won the championship and I had a pretty, decent team. But I saw an opportunity to make a trade where I saw, there was a manager who was being a little bit aggressive in trading for what I frankly would consider kind of subpar assets. Really just trying to, I guess, build a competitive roster. But this is really early in the offseason. We're talking like April, May at this point. And frankly, I didn't really think he had the pieces to put it all together. So I just sort of floated an offer out there, something to do with like, I'll give you Chris Godwin if you send me your first round pick. And I thought I was going to have to like add extra. And I was basically able to get that done like straight up. And now a couple months go by, it looks like his 24 first is pretty locked in to be top 5, maybe top 3. And so, I was able to just swing a massive value win just by being willing to part with what you might consider a win now asset on a win now team for what you consider like a win later asset. But if you don't think of it that way and you just think of it as draft picks are currency, right? And you can buy and sell them at will, that's going to just help you stay ahead of the game because you're not going to be stuck with these pieces you can't move. And then I can go just trade that first if I need to. And so I think that's just one way that you can kind of game the system.
I mean, that goes right to what I was saying in terms of the life cycle, because why is he buying a Chris Godwin at that point in the dynasty life cycle in the off season when he could just wait and use that first when, now we see that we know more about his team, right? He knows more about his team. He's not scoring points anyway right now. So it's like he could have just waited and said, oh, maybe this just doesn't make sense for my team because it's not going to work out. But maybe he's just flawed thinking and thinks he's going to win no matter what. You never know. Right. But either way, I think that you took advantage of that, of course, there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I talked about on the show with Jacob Sanderson like a month ago, where you don't need to go out and try to fill all your needs right now. Like what you want to do is just keep improving the value of your roster and trust that the opportunities are going to open themselves up to fill those needs. And that's exactly what happened. Like I was able to trade away a wide receiver, and I knew that I have 5 months where it doesn't matter what my wide receivers look like. It really doesn't matter. And, maybe I wouldn't get this trade done in July. Like it's all set now. Like I have Tyreek Hill, whatever, I can put him in that spot. But it could have been, late July. It could have been August. Like it could have been week 1. I don't like at some point I'm going to be able to make a trade for a wide receiver because every team has wide receivers and some teams are going to be, out of contention at some point. And then that's going to open up an opportunity for me to go and buy somebody. So maybe just don't panic is like, that's kind of a simple piece of advice, but don't panic about what your team needs or what players you need to get off your team. Like it's just let the market kind of come to you. You can send offers, but don't come across as desperate because that right off the bat, that's going to like lower anything you're getting back in a trade. So just realize there are a lot of managers you can trade with, and there's a lot of ways to get things done. You just have to be creative and patient.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things you've hit on is that you need to not be afraid to get rid of players. You can't get attached to these guys. Like I love football first, and there's so many football players that I really enjoy watching and would love to have on my dynasty teams. Like I would love to have AJ Brown on every roster because I just like the player so much, but I don't play dynasty that way. I'm willing to give them up when I see value coming my way. Always. So I think you have to play it that way. If you want to win, if your goal is to just have fun, by all means do your thing. But if you want to like win often, I think you have to let go of the player bias.
I find winning to be pretty fun, so I usually try to do that. Yeah,
me too.
Devonta Smith is one of my favorite players in the NFL. I'm an Eagles fan, and he's super fun to watch. But my last 2 big trades I made involved trading away Smith because, frankly, I think he's a little overvalued in Dynasty. I think there's an opportunity there to cash in, and so that's what I did. Like if his price corrects and he becomes a value, then maybe I'll go pick up some shares. But as of right now, I think I'm sitting at 0% rostership with Devonta Smith, and that's fine because I don't think at his current cost, he's helping me win fantasy championships, and I can just go draft him in best ball and I can be happy with that. And that's fine.
It is crazy where he is. Sorry. He's like really, he's ahead of like a lot of really good receivers. Like,
yeah, exactly. I just don't get it. I don't think it's correct. I don't think it's an efficient price. And so I'm not going to hold on to priors or, hold on to a player that I like just because I like him. I don't like players. I like ADPs. So
there you go.
Our first question in the league management portion of our show fits in very nicely with what we've just been talking about. And it comes from DFF Zone, Ben Winkler. He asks, how aggressive are you currently in sending out offers? And I'll take this one first. Basically, it depends on the league. I'm not overly concerned, like I said, with filling needs. What I'm really trying to do is improve the roster construction of my teams or just accrue more value. So I'm just trying to exploit inefficiencies in the market, which means if I have a player that I think is overvalued, I'm going to be a little more aggressive in trying to send out some trades where I think maybe the market could correct itself, right? So like with Devonta Smith, I don't know where his value is going to go over the next couple of months, but I know right now it's too high. So I've been kind of aggressively trying to see where I can use Devonta Smith to either tier down into a player like Jerry Jeudy, who I think is kind of a similar bet, or I'm trying to use him to make bigger trades, like package deals to get elite quarterbacks or get an elite tight end or something like that. So that's where I'm being more aggressive. On teams where I just like, oh, I need a running back, like I'm just going to wait on that.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with waiting on running back. That was something I think I said on the Superflex Super Show. I talked about a lot this offseason is there's no reason to handcuff yourself to a running back right now because so much can happen. There's a lot of uncertainty. You just may as well wait, and the price is not going to change too much. So no reason to really do that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, in terms of sending out offers, I've talked about this a lot too on Dynasty Underdog. I think that you should be sending out offers pretty often, but not just to send out offers and not just to buy random players or players you like. The only reason I ever send out a trade offer personally is because I think the trade I'm sending is going to improve my team. That is the only reason I'm doing it. But if that means I'm going to pick up picks or whatever it is, that's what I'm going to be doing. So I like to send out a lot of offers. I like to just like send out a lot of offers, even if like they're, more in my favor and likely to be maybe rejected or countered, because sometimes I get those deals done. And like, and in the off season, I'm not really doing anything else. So why not get a deal done that is, that's giving me plus value.
Yeah, it's not like any of us have lives or hobbies. Like we just go on Sleeper and we just send out trade offers. Like that's what we do. Why would you do anything else? That's just plus EV all day. No, I'm with you. I do the same thing, and it's it should be obvious what you said. Like only make a trade if it's going to improve your team. But I don't know if everybody thinks that way. Like I think
I don't. Yeah.
Or people just don't actually know what improves their team. Like some people think improving their team means you can post a nicer looking screenshot on Twitter of what the team looks like, which like isn't true. If you don't need your starting lineup to be a nice Twitter screenshot in July. If it is, good for you. You've done you've done well. But it's not always the best way to get where you're going. So be flexible, send out trades to improve your team. And usually that just means accruing additional value. It doesn't always have to do with what the position of the player is, or even how many points they're going to score this year. So
here's a good example, I think, of one that was like 50-50 split on like what people thought about it in terms. It was a trade I did. I think it was I traded Etienne and Mike Evans for Gibbs in a second in 24. I think it was what it was, right? And And I think that improves that roster specifically by a good bit. But just in general, I think that is a win. Now, people might not think that, but I think if you're locked in and you have some conviction, you can see how that's going to be a win. We talk a lot about losing a trade now, winning in 6 months. So some are going to look like that, but it's really more so, like Paul's saying, is like it's always trying to get plus value and always being, I think, honest with yourself. That's a big part of it, is being honest with yourself about the values, not getting over your heels. I'm not going after Gibbs because I'm biased. If we talked about this. I, before the draft, was not a big Gibbs guy. I wasn't. Adjust, react, all that good stuff.
Yeah, he went 12th overall. No, I think you crushed that trade.
Exactly.
You crushed that trade. I think we actually mentioned it the last time you were on. You had just made the trade. And at that point, ETN's value hadn't corrected, and he was still ahead of Gibbs in ADP. But I thought it was a smash. Within a couple of weeks, it had flipped, and now Gibbs is going like at least almost a full round ahead of ETN in startups. And then, I mean, you know how I feel about Mike Evans. I mean, I have no interest.
Oh yeah, I knew you would care about that part. But yeah, it's a 303 for Gibbs and 406 for Etienne right now. So
yeah. So you definitely won that. You saw where the market was going. You skated to where the puck was going, which is a thing people who watch hockey say. And I don't watch hockey, but it's a good expression. And you
sound like you do.
So I don't.
Appreciate that.
All right, this will be our easiest question. It comes in from Justin Tech. Should there be positional maximums for dynasty rosters? No, there shouldn't be.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
No,
There's
there's no
I don't
reason for
really need to
that.
explain it.
Yeah, like you don't need to enforce these arbitrary rules on the league. Like if somebody wants to hoard 10 quarterbacks, let them. If somebody wants to have 0 running backs, let them. Like it just let people build their teams the way they want to. You don't need to impose those kind of rules. All right. Cool. Next question comes from Keg719. What do you look for when joining a new dynasty league? Scoring, draft setup, players, payouts, etc. Billy, why don't you take this one first? Because my answer is kind of boring.
Yeah, maybe mine's not as boring. I don't know. I have more notes here than I should, I feel like. But like for me, I do prefer like certain setups, right? Like I unless it's a league that fixes in what I view as fixes QB scoring, kind of like how Scott Fishbowl did it last year, you know, the negatives for incompletions and so on and so forth. Unless it's like that, it's always got to be a super flex league for me.
Right.
I prefer PPR almost always. You can maybe convince me into a 0.5. I want some sort of premium or 2 tight end setup where we're at least kind of enhancing the position, making it, you know, more meaningful and having people kind of actually draft the position. Other than that, I want deep rosters. I want like 30 plus at least for my rosters. I want no best ball for my dynasty. I know that is like blasphemy on this podcast, but I want deep starting lineups, 11 plus, and then I want flexible position limits, if that makes sense. So I want more flex spots than like locked in wide receivers, running backs, like at least one per position, obviously. But after that, like I'm fine with every other one being a flex spot personally.
Okay. Well, I agree with a lot of that. I definitely super flex is a must. I prefer tight end premium. I prefer PPR. I kind of like 6-point passing touchdowns, but I'm also okay with I'm in a couple leagues now that do 5-point, which is like a kind of a acceptable compromise. And I like at least 10 starters. 10 or 11 is kind of my sweet spot. I don't get on board with the like super. I like super flex, so that was the wrong way to say it. I don't like when there's tons of flex spots. I do like having some rigidity in terms of the positional starters. I just think it makes the trade market more interesting. I think when there's all those flex spots, it can be kind of hard to parse through like which guys you actually want, whereas trades become a little more simple where it's like, I need a wide receiver, you need a running back, let's make a deal. It just takes some of that out of it. So I prefer at least 2 of each requirement. I'm not in any 2 tight end leagues currently. Kind of freaks me out a little bit, but I'd be open to it potentially. And I do like best ball. I don't need all of my dynasty leagues to be best ball, but it is something that I enjoy. I think it adds some different wrinkles to the equation that you don't get out of managed. So that's pretty much it for me. I don't care that much. In terms of the buy-ins or payouts, basically I'm just poor. So anything over $50, I'm probably out. I'm in too many leagues to put that much in one basket. So I'd rather be in 15, $25 to $50 leagues than be in like a couple of $250 leagues, especially because like I'll just stress out way too much about that league. I'd rather just have a lot of different options for something to, pan out for me. And then honestly, my biggest point of like pickiness is really just who I'm playing with. I just want to play in leagues with people that I like. Honestly, I shouldn't it lowers my EV because the people I like also happen to be people that I think are smart, and then it becomes harder to win the league. So I should just be playing with like randoms from Reddit and just maxing, my expected winning. But it's too much fun to talk trash in the chat and work on big trades with people that I like. So unfortunately, that's how I do it.
You love pain, don't you? You like when Chris just takes all your players right before you pick. Yeah, that's what it is.
Oh my gosh, don't talk to me about that. Yeah. Chris from last week's show, as a joke, joined my Scott Fishbowl division and took the draft pick right after me, thinking that he could just go and change it after he sent me the screenshot, and then it just locked just like that, and then he was stuck there. So we're drafting back to back, and we have like all the same takes on all the same players. So he already stole Tony Pollard from me. It's just I'm not very happy about it. The last question in this section comes in from DSP 4150. This is David Plot or Plout. I don't know how to say his name, but he's a great guy. He's an analyst on the Bulletproof Discord. Actually, we talk a lot over there, and he asked me, "What is your favorite scoring or lineup system in any of your leagues?" Which I thought was a cool question. I don't have any like crazy scoring or lineup systems though in any of my leagues. Like I said, I like the straightforward Superflex tight end premium PPR, 6-point touchdowns, 10 starters. Like that's just right for me. And I like when my leagues are more or less similar so that I don't have to think too much when I'm in a certain league about a trade I'm trying to make. Like, oh, is that the league where they give 50 points per reception? Like I don't want that. I want to be able to just sort of make trades the same way. So I try to keep mine pretty uniform.
Yeah, I don't know if I like tried to keep them super uniform, but I think it's just kind of the format I like, which is similar to what you're kind of talking about, which is I think becoming more of the standard. That said, I think there's a format that I would like. I wouldn't even mind if all my leagues were like this, but I really like the idea of tiered PPR, and I think that it should become more of a commonplace league setting where, you know, the running back gets 0.5, the wide receiver gets 1, and the tight end gets 1.5, right? Something like that. I just think it kind of balances things out a little bit more, and you know, it just kind of makes a little more sense to me. I think adding in the points per carry things can be fun sometimes, but again, that it just gets really nuanced at that point. So I do like the tiered PPR thing though.
Yeah, I'm in a couple of leagues like that. It's okay. I don't know how much it actually, like, it definitely changes things. But my problem with all of those little scoring differences is that it's so hard to actually quantify where the like micro edges are, and so you just end up overthinking everything. And at the end of the day, it like changes things like 5% at most, and you're just like stressing out. Like, wait, if he gets 0.1 per carry and he gets 0.039 points per first down, like does that mean that player X is better than player Y? Like I can't figure it out. I just like PPR. Like it's just like give me points per reception.
That's fair.
Yeah,
That's fair.
but I get it. I get it. Some people like to think about that kind of thing, and I'm a little more big picture. But I will throw out a league that I think is my most interesting, that I created with Chris actually, and this is a Pokemon themed Empire League that we started together. And so the way that this works, because we're giant nerds, is so an Empire League is basically like a Dynasty League. It continues in perpetuity, except that when you hit a certain outcome, the league resets and there's a new draft. So it's not redraft. It's not exactly Dynasty. It's in the middle. In this case, the outcome you have to hit is that you actually have to earn 8 different badges, like, you know, the Pokemon badges. And you earn each one by accomplishing something like during the season. So you get one for like having the best record during the regular season. You get one for like most points for, you get one for winning the championship. And then if you earn all 8 badges and then you win the championship, that resets the league. And then that pays out the entire pot over all the years that it had built up to that point. And if you have a badge, you get to activate it during the season to use like special abilities where you can like have an extra flex player, or you can like multiply one of your players' scores and stuff like that. So I am in that league. I created that league, and that one is a lot of fun.
That sounds incredible. But yeah, I mean, if that's what we're talking about, then Console Wars is easily my favorite league, which is
great one as well.
30, yeah, and Paul's in there now too. Took over an orphan a year or two ago. It's a 36 team, 3 copy, 3 division Dynasty League, and it's super awesome. Like it's kind of like an all play. Once you get to the playoffs, you know you're playing all the divisions, but it acts as kind of 3 self-sustaining 12 team leagues essentially, and it's, you know, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo. So it's just really cool theme. It's a super active group of people, and just like it's a great league. So I highly recommend. Like, that was the first Dynasty League I ever got into, 3 copies. It's really interesting, and it's really fun, and it brings a really cool dynamic. So if you can find one with a good group of people, I highly recommend trying to find a, you know, multi-copy league. It changes things up.
Probably a nightmare to commish, but it is a lot of fun to play in. I need to look at how the playoffs work. I actually have no idea, because the orphan I took over was so bad I didn't even care. Like I haven't even been remotely close to the playoffs, so I don't know how they work. I did win a consolation bracket last year that I got the 113 for, which was pretty exciting. I was halfway through the consolation bracket before I realized that I was in it. And then I was like, oh shoot, like I have no starting quarterbacks on my team. I better go trade for one. So, you know, it all worked out.
Oh my goodness. Hey, you make it work one way or another, right? You make it work.
I was at a family dinner, and I was like, oh shoot, the games kick off in 3 hours and I have no starting quarterback. And if I win this game, I get the 113. And I was spamming out trade offers. Like I was just every starting quarterback that I could think of. I ended up trading for Brock Purdy, I think. And when he was like still pretty cheap. and it ended up working out for me because he has gained a bunch of value since then. And then I traded him for Josh Allen.
For Josh Allen, that's amazing.
But
wait, did you get the 113? Did you get the 113?
No, I did.
That's ridiculous that you traded for Purdy, got the first round pick, then you ended up using him and getting Josh Allen is just unbelievable. Great full circle moment for you.
Yeah, I was pretty happy. I was very happy. But somehow I got through the first round of that thing with no quarterback, and I was just like, oh shoot, now I'm in this thing. I gotta keep going. So yeah, it was great because the only quarterback I only had Kyler Murray and Jimmy Garoppolo, and they were both out with injuries. And so
fantasy football makes no sense, dude.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. It's nonsense. All right. So let's get into our last section here where we have a couple trade questions and a couple of player questions. The first one, I think, is the most interesting, maybe has the most to talk about. And somehow I didn't write down the name of the person who asked the question, so I apologize. But the question is, why do people place so much value on Dak? He was fantastic in 2019, but hasn't stayed healthy since. He's only finished QB6 or better once. I have a lot of thoughts on Dak. Like I said, I have him at the end of that elite quarterback tier where he's a guy that I do want to grab to build my dynasty rosters around. I think he is at the end of that tier now because he does seem to rush a little less than he used to. He does turn 30 years old this month, which does make him the only one out of that group, to be that age. But I don't know. I'm still in on him. Billy, I'd like to hear your take first, and then I can kind of throw out some numbers.
Yeah. I mean, 30 is not too old, but like you said, he finished top 5 once, but top 12 5 of the 7 years he's played, right? Finished QB9 in 2021 after the injury, played just 12 games in 2022 on a team marred with just injuries in general, while losing Amari Cooper, not really getting anything in addition. We saw Michael Gallup never got right. They add Cooks this offseason. They shed Elliott. So despite McCarthy obviously being the running guy, I think we're going to see a little uptick in the passing attempts. Another year removed from the injury, hoping for, maybe he gets back to rushing a little bit more. But even if not, we have a perennial top 12 dynasty quarterback here with decent security through 2025 at the very least. So I think, just what the team's done, adding the weapons, I do think that, we could see an uptick in production in general here. And already he's a really solid dynasty quarterback. I mean, it's not bad. It's definitely a QB1.
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is he's really, really good. Like in real life, he's really good. I think I do think that there are some people that are kind of clinging to the recency bias where, you look at the touchdown interception ratio last year, it was really poor. But that's an outlier for his career. Like he's been a very low interception percentage player throughout his career. I think he just got a little unlucky in 2022. And then, same thing with the touchdown rate. It was just, Ezekiel Elliott had a rushing touchdown in 9 straight games. Like he just kept getting to the 1 yard line and then punching it in. And it just kept taking these passing touchdowns away from Dak. And that happens. Like teams will run hot or cold on rushing and passing touchdowns. It's not to say that it's a trend. And I also think his finishes are a little bit misleading because, in 2020, he was obviously 5 games, but he was the QB1 through 5 games before he broke his ankle. And even in 2021, where he didn't finish as a top 6 quarterback, he did put up over 20 points per game. It was just a crazy good year for quarterback scoring, where there were 8 or 9 quarterbacks that all got to 20 points per game. But if you actually look back, since 2017, so basically since Dak's second year in the league, this is all the quarterbacks that have put up 2 or more 20-point per game seasons. It's Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Matthew Stafford, and Dak Prescott. So, that's the company you want to be in, right? He has the ceiling. When you talk about that next tier of guys like Cousins, Geno, Goff, whoever, they don't realistically have that type of upside. I mean, if they get really hot on touchdown rate one season, they might be able to do it. But Dak is more so, that's the expectation. On a regular year, he's going to be, prolific enough to get you into that conversation. And that's where I think quarterbacks kind of become difference makers. So there is a cutoff for me there. And like you said, looking at last year, basically everything went wrong for him. He did lose Amari Cooper. Gallup was hobbled. Dalton Schultz missed time. Ezekiel Elliott was stealing all these 1 yard touchdowns. They also had a ton of positive game scripts. By per player profile, they were 6th in game script. Like they were up by big margins constantly, wasting clock. And for that reason, they were 19th in pass attempts per game, which is the lowest they've been since Dak's like 2nd or 3rd season in the NFL. So if anything, I think the attempts are more likely to go up than down. And even in that nightmare of a situation, he was the QB 13 in points per game. You know, if you see the attempts go up a little bit, you see the touchdown distribution bounce back, you see the interceptions drop to where they've been throughout his career. And then you look at getting Brandon Cooks on the field to stretching the field, Michael Gallup healthy, getting the better running back and Tony Pollard on the field more. I genuinely think that Dak could bounce back to that, 20 point per game number that we've seen from him recently.
Yeah, it's actually super interesting that, talking about the QB scoring in 2021, because when I saw this question, I was just looking at all the numbers and everything. I was looking at his stats, and 2021 season is just like, he was awesome, dude. He had like a 70% completion percentage, 4,500 yards, 37 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I mean, like, he was absolutely elite. Like, it was just a great year. So yeah, I think last year is, people are walking away with a really bad taste in their mouth, and he's getting some undeserved hate probably, and they're not seeing that. I think the team has gotten better around him. And again, another year removed from injuries all around the team. Yeah, I think we're going to see a bounce back here.
Yeah, this is kind of a micro take just because it wouldn't work in a ton of situations. But if you have a roster where, let's say you ended up with a top 5 pick, either you traded for it or maybe you're coming out of a productive struggle, I would happily take Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and turn them into Dak Prescott. Like, some cases you don't even have to give anything up, but give up something small, give up a second or something to turn those quarterbacks into Dak, because those quarterbacks are not going to help you this year. And they don't rush at all. Like, their ceiling is basically Dak Prescott. So I would rather buy the points now, like get a potential top 6 quarterback this year. I'm not worried about his age. Then you don't have to worry about whether Young or Stroud actually turn into that guy. I think that's just a much safer way to store value, and it helps you win now, as opposed to holding these quarterbacks who aren't going to be, fantasy starters for you. And maybe they pan out. They probably will. I mean, I think that they're good quarterbacks, but there's always a chance that things can go horribly wrong, especially when you have the kinds of weapons that Young and Stroud have on the teams that they're on. And I would also be willing to do the same with Richardson, except that he's going so far ahead of Dak that I would feel like you would need to get a first, or not a first, but you need to get a plus on top just based on how the market sits. But I would be willing to do that for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, I actually just remembered at the end of last season, it was like, I think it was going into, one of the final weeks of the playoff run, I had Kyler Murray on my team. And I think that's when it was, right? When he got injured, or he was just injured at the time.
Late. It was like week 15, 14, something like that he got hurt.
Yeah. So he got hurt, and then somebody sent me, this was in console where somebody sent me Dak and Jordan Love for Kyler, and I just instantly accepted it. And, I'm not the biggest Kyler guy. So for me, I was just like, healthy quarterback? Yes, please. Thank you. But I think that just goes to show kind of the hate or not the hate, but just how low his value really is. Mm-hmm. When you're trading just a straight up like healthy Dak Prescott plus another quarterback for Kyler Murray, there's opportunity there to go get some Dak Prescott, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I love Kyler, and I think that was fair. As long as you immediately turn around and trade Jordan Love away for, anything you can get. I traded him.
I did. I traded him in something for Geno Smith.
There we go. There you go. That's how you do it. See, that's the thing. You just have to be willing to take in, like, people are too picky about trades. You can trade, if it's good value, just take like whatever on your team, because you're going to find some other person to take it off your hands. Even if you sell for like 90 cents on the dollar, you can still win those types of deals, and you can, it's okay if you have a gross Jordan Love share for a week on your team, you just turn around and you trade it. It's fine. Like, you can do that. So that's great. And it does show that there's opportunity there, and you don't want to undervalue those points you can get right now. Like, give yourself a chance to win now. And in a lot of cases, turning a Stroud into a Dak Prescott is going to give you that chance. So I think you should be open to it. The next question comes from good friend of DFF, Lucas McLean, who asks,
Lucas, my guy.
Lucas wants to know, he's a Broncos fan, right? I think he is.
Yeah.
He wants to know, at cost, do you prefer Jerry Jeudy or Marvin Mims? Personally, I like both guys at their price. I think they're both well priced, because I think pretty much the whole Broncos offense is undervalued due to how horrible it looked last season.
Mhm.
But I guess I prefer Jeudy just because I think ultimately he's going to have more upside. And obviously that comes at a higher price. But I think Mims, like as in terms of his prospect profile and in terms of his cost in rookie drafts, I do like him and I draft him. But I also still acknowledge that it's like pretty unlikely he's ever going to be a player that matters in fantasy football. Like really what I'm doing is I think he has a better chance to gain value than some other guys in that range. That's really why I want him. I don't really foresee a lot of outcomes where he becomes a highly relevant fantasy asset. Whereas Judy's right there. Like his peripherals last year were pretty similar to T. Higgins, Devonta Smith. And if you see that offense take a nice little bounce back, if we get some vintage Russell Wilson, he could really break out. Like he genuinely does have wide receiver 1 upside.
Yeah, and you're talking about T. Higgins and Devonta Smith, yet Judy's going 2 rounds later than them. So
Exactly.
if we're talking about cost here, right? I mean, you basically read my mind, but the way I put it is, if we're talking about cost, I like Mims, but I'm not sure he can be more than really a boomer bust kind of like flex filler at maybe best. I mean, he might be able to be more consistent, whether we care about that or not. That said, I think Jeudy has top 12 potential upside in him, and his cost is super palatable, right?
Yes.
Now, obviously, I think he's probably more in the top 24 and maybe on the higher end of that, but he totally does have that upside as the wide receiver 1 in a Russell Wilson led offense, right? So yeah, I mean, he's going right. I mean, Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnson are going ahead of Jerry Jeudy per ADP, and that makes me want to scream.
We just talked about that last week. We were ranking those guys right there in that range, and I definitely would have taken both the rookies over him just a couple months ago, and I'm really coming around just because I've taken a little closer look at those underlying metrics, and just seeing what he was actually doing last year. It was masked by a garbage offense, but he on his, in his own right, kind of like Drake London, right? And in his own right, what he could control as a player, he was doing everything that he could to score fantasy points. And if you plopped him into a better offense, it would have been more obvious. And now maybe that offense does become better because there were tons of injuries last year. He dealt with injuries too. Obviously the offensive system was totally broken. Russ was on a new team. There's just a lot of reasons to think that this offense could be the one that we see really bounce back. And he's going to be the biggest beneficiary, along with, of course, future top 5 dynasty tight end Greg Dulcich.
Wow, genuine laughter out of me there. Whew. Wow, that was a good one.
Not a joke. Next question is a trade question from my friend Craig. He's on Twitter at ff_schmuck. We're in a couple leagues together, and I think this trade is actually one that he made with Chris. He dealt Jerome Ford and a 2024 second for DeAndre Swift and a 2024 third. I'm out on DeAndre Swift, and I still want the Swift side here. All right, what do you think?
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, as soon as I look at this, I've probably talked up Jerome Ford more than anybody. not because I love him or anything. I just he's the guy there now that there's nobody behind Chubb. So it's like,
yeah,
you talk about him a little bit here and there, but yeah, DeAndre Swift. I mean, that this is a little too far. I think the hate's gone a little too far. I think he still has enough value to clear Jerome Ford here, and I don't see enough difference. I think between the picks. Though obviously the second is greater, I don't see enough difference really making it up there for me.
Just a little peek behind the curtain. I believe Swift was Chris's highest owned dynasty running back, which first of all, ouch, that hurts. But second of all, I think he got a little bit carried away trying to dump all of his DeAndre Swift shares. Personally, I think he got a little too hasty here because this price is just too low. Like Jerome Ford and the third are basically a wash. And so it's a 24 second for DeAndre Swift. And you're going to be able to get that for him for months. Like you're honestly, even if this season goes horribly wrong, you'll probably be able to get a second for him after the season. I'd be holding on, just hold on to him throughout the summer. Like see if you can use him in a package deal or see if you can get him in a more beneficial trade. Like there's no benefit to dealing him for a second right now. I think that's the thing. That's the bigger takeaway that I want to highlight from the trade is if you have a player like this where you're kind of out on them and you don't want them on your team, you don't have to go and deal them for anything because there's not a lot of cases where their value is going to go one way or the other right now. Like this is the dead time. Like not much is really happening. And so you have time to kind of shop around and get the best price.
And also, DeAndre Swift is the kind of player who's in the kind of offense that I'm almost willing to let him sit on my roster and watch him have maybe an early boom game or two, in the season, and then you can move him for more than that second round pick. You know
Maybe
what I mean?
a first, maybe a 2025 first, right? Like if
Correct.
he looks good in the early in the season. Yeah, as long as you have the discipline, if he comes out and like scores 2 touchdowns week 1 to just like not care and just deal him and don't try to hold on, then that's what you should do because he probably will have some big games. It is an explosive offense. I don't really believe in the talent anymore, at least at the price. And I also don't love the situation for him in terms of a ceiling outcome because I don't think the pass catching is going to be there. And I think Rashad Penny is really the better rusher. And so I don't want him on my teams, but I also am willing to hold him because I think there will be other ways to get out.
What I do want to, something you just kind of said made me think about this, but this is a huge, huge one that I practice and I don't know if a lot of people do, but one of my dynasty superpowers is being able to practice patience, like serious patience though. Like talking about the QBX strategy or whatever, I did that one time, picked the wrong QBs, and I would not sell them low. I wouldn't do it. And I ended up selling them. Like I ended up selling after things went south with Baker Mayfield in Cleveland. Some package deal got Cooper Kupp back. I'm trying to think who the other one was. Some other Sam Darnold when he got traded to Carolina.
Oh God.
I got to move him for Tyreek Hill in some deal. Like
what?
No, I'll go look back at the deals. But I promise you, they were absurd. Like they were just absurd deals.
Are you sure your superpower isn't mind control?
Yeah, right. It might be. But it's definitely patience. And the whole thing is obviously there's a point where you got to sell for certain players, but
yeah,
it's really just like you don't have to be hasty a lot of the time. You don't have to rush it. You can wait. You can wait for the tides to turn, and you can get value back for them. I've had people tell me, "You're never going to sell Aaron Rodgers for X, whatever, in trade negotiations," and I turn around a month later when things get better and trade him for X. You got to be patient and know what the value actually is, and not get rid of it.
You have to know what you're looking for, which means you have to be confident, right? If you have to have takes. Like I let the market inform a lot of my decisions, but I also have my own opinions. And if you don't have any basis of like how valuable you think your players are, you're going to get pushed around in trades because you're going to be like, oh, well, this is all that I'm being offered right now. I guess that's what they're worth. And then you're going to take that. But if you have some kind of like structure to how you value these players, and then you compare that against the market, that's where you find the inefficiencies where you can sell a player high, you can buy a player low, or you can just know that this is the time to hold a player. I'm not going to get what he's worth right now. And you just wait. Right. Yes. That's how I feel about a lot of guys on my teams. Like I'm like where I can, I'm looking to tear down from Travis Etienne because I still kind of think he's overvalued. But it's not like I'm not doing it aggressively. Like I'm sending out offers where I can, but if I'm getting turned down, I'm not going to just lower the asking price. Like that defeats the whole purpose. The reason I want to trade him is because of the price. So if nobody's willing to pay it, like if the micro market of your league just doesn't see it that way, then hold him. Like somebody, Etienne's just one example, but like he's still going to score points this year and he's still young. So I don't need to trade him. It's just like, oh, that would be cool. If I could get a similarly ranked player plus a second, I'd love to do that, but I don't have to. Right. So I think that's a good idea. And I love the idea of dynasty superpowers. I want to do like a whole episode centered around that. We should do it.
I love that. I don't even know why I said it. Like it just came to me, but I actually love it. I agree with you.
It's a great phrase. Like I want to just put that, like that needs to be on something. I don't know, but we'll put that away in the little idea vault. We'll get out of here with one more trade question. This one's a little more involved. Comes in from Kevin Hall 89. He gives us a little bit of context. Superflex, full PPR, start 11 league. He has Herbert and Lawrence as his quarterbacks. Good stuff. And he's asking if he should trade away Jonathan Taylor, Jared Goff, and a mid to late 24 first for Nick Chubb and CeeDee Lamb. I'm going to read that one more time because it's a lot of pieces. Should he trade away Taylor, Goff, mid to late 24 first to get Nick Chubb and CeeDee Lamb?
Yeah, this is a really tough trade, man. It really is, because like Goff kind of is the wrench in the whole thing.
Right.
Because the quarterback value just like shakes it up so much in a super flex league. Because I don't hate the Chubb side, right? Like I like the idea of getting CeeDee Lamb back, who just has so much more longevity than almost any piece on the other side. So
Yeah.
I don't hate it, but there's just it's just missing something for me. I don't know what it is. So I don't know if I could give up JT and the first and Goff for Nick Chubb and CeeDee Lamb.
You said you were prepared, Billy. You said you had notes. Come on, what is this?
I did. You want to know what my notes say?
Analysis?
You want to know what my notes say for this?
What does it say?
Don't hate Chubb side.
Kevin needs our help. He needs our help. He probably made this trade 2 weeks ago when he posted the question, but
no.
But anyway, yeah, my thoughts are like, first of all, I get the idea behind the trade, which is that you can trade Taylor for Chubb and get basically the same production this year, right? And then you get CeeDee Lamb. So I think for like a really stacked team with a lot of surplus roster value, I think that makes some sense. Like you can burn a little bit of value, maintain the running back production, and then add a stud wide receiver. And maybe you lose a little bit on value, but obviously you win the trade, postseason, you immediately are like probably winning the trade. But honestly, like as it stands in a regular situation, I think it's hard to see this one paying off value wise without Lamb really hitting an absolute ceiling outcome, just because Goff and Chubb kind of go in a similar range of startup drafts. And like the trade market's a little bit different because quarterbacks and startups are kind of weird. Like they go early, but either way, like they're not that far off from each other. And then I would not trade Jonathan Taylor and a first for CeeDee Lamb. Like I think that's too much. They're closer than that for me. And so it's a little too aggressive, I think. And if Lamb doesn't come out and post like a top 5 finish, I think you'll probably be regretting that deal.
Yeah. I mean, you basically said what I said, just way more eloquently. Like
what I do.
Yeah, no, I mean, I largely agree with that. I think that I would need something else. Maybe a second on the Lamb side would maybe make it work, which isn't that much, I guess. So you're like, why? But like, I don't know. Just I feel like you need a little bit more value to cover, the youth and the QB value on the other side. It's funny that this one came up because we talked about on Dynasty Underdog, Jonathan Taylor for Chubb in a first. Just that the idea of that trade and what you said like made a lot of sense. Where it's like Nick Chubb is like easily outscore Jonathan Taylor this year, and if you can get a first on top of that, and then if that happens, you could turn around and trade Chubb for something like. You could really make something like that work. I don't know. This made me think of that, but there's clearly a lot of people thinking about these two and trading them for each other. So there's something there.
Yeah. I mean, they're similar kind of players. Like they're not high volume receivers and they're really, really good pure rushers and they're big and they're strong and they're fast and they break big plays. Like there's a lot of similarities between the two of them. Taylor's obviously 2-3 years younger, which is why he's more valuable, but they could score similar this year. If you look at their underdog ADP, it's basically back to back. So I think there are interesting arbitrage opportunities there, not just with those two players, but if you look around, like it's like what I said last week at the wide receivers. You look at, Keenan Allen is going, half a round to a full round behind like Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, et cetera, in redraft leagues, underdog drafts. He's probably going to score similarly to them. And that makes them a little bit less valuable or a little bit less enticing, at least to me, to roster in a dynasty league where I'd rather trade down for a wide receiver like that and then get a big plus on top and just sort of, stow away those future draft picks or whatever. And get the similar production. So I think those kinds of trades can make sense. I just don't think the value lines up on this one.
Yeah, and those are perfect for you too, because you don't care about the player. So if you get Keenan Allen and he starts scoring a lot of points, you could turn around and trade him too. And so boom. Yeah, that's how it works.
I think Keenan Allen's at the stage of his career where like even when he's scoring points, nobody's gonna want him. But I'll just soak it up. That's like fair. I'll just take in all the Keenan Allen, whatever. Like I don't care. I'll pay second round prices for high end wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 1 production every day. I love it. So more for me. Any final thoughts, Billy? I don't have any more questions for you. Just that one.
Listen to Dynasty Underdog, join the Discord, join dynastyfootballfactory.com, hop in that Discord because it's awesome what we have going on in there. I actually am putting the finishing touches on an article. I've been talking a lot about like value over replacement player the past couple of weeks. It's the off season, so you can kind of dive into some of that stuff, even if it's, just a small edge. And had a couple conversations with John Hogue about it, and hopped into Peter Howard's DMs, and that created kind of some extra research on his side. So I put that together in an article to kind of just go over the findings on that, see if that helps people out a little bit, and that'll be dropping soon. So that's kind of what I got working on. Otherwise, I'm helping you get this show out on the air.
Always helping me out. Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I obviously Peter Howard's super sharp. That's probably going to be some really cool stuff, and another layer to this game that we play. But yeah, I second everything you said about the Discord for sure. There's a lot of great conversations happening in there every day. We have just like a designated trade channel where we're always like giving each other help on trades and stuff, and it's really interesting. It helps me kind of work through my thought process when I'm stuck on a deal. I can get some extra opinions. So even just for that, it's great to be in there. So if you have a membership or you're considering getting one, that is kind of a selling point for me. I meant to mention this right off the top, but those of you that did send in questions, I really, really appreciate it. So thank you for doing that. Hopefully those of you that send in questions are listeners of the show. And if you have more questions, please, you can DM me on Twitter. You can leave them as a comment on YouTube. You can DM Billy on Twitter and he'll send them to me. Like, do whatever, however you can get the question. You can send it by carrier pigeon. Like, I will answer the question. If you send it, we'll do another mailbag because this was a lot of fun and they were really good questions. So that's awesome. And then otherwise, just keep listening, keep supporting, and I will keep on doing this for you. And I will bring Billy back probably on episode 21, I guess. And and we'll just go from there. And we'll talk about Dynasty Superpowers or something.
We already have our next topic. Let's go.
I'm thinking 40 chess over here. This has been the Factory Tour, and I will see you all next week.